This is one of the most disturbing and messed up cases we have ever talked about. It's about a teenage girl convincing her boyfriend to kill himself, and not just failing to stop him. No, that would be too easy. When he got scared and tried to back out, she told him to keep going. And the more you look at the details, the worse it gets. This is the case of Michelle Carter and Conrad Roy.
Welcome back
to Tell Me the Crime, episode 14.
14 today.
Oh, man. Yeah, that means 14 weeks that we've been doing this.
Mm-hmm.
Shit, that's crazy.
So 3.5 months.
A long time, but we love it. It's fun stuff. Actually, today's episode is probably one of the craziest cases I've ever come
You seem
across.
so prepared today.
I'm prepared for it because I kept looking at everything that was going on, and it's just so disturbing.
Is it a recent one?
Yeah, it's fairly recent. Yeah, it's recent. I think it was in, was it 2022?
Ooh.
Or something like that. Maybe it was, no, it wasn't 2022. This started in 2012, and I think, yeah.
Wow,
so
14 years ago.
Yeah, a long time ago. But so this case, though, is really, really messed up. So
You gotta tell us the title.
Okay. Well, the title of the case is, what did I call this one? Hold on one sec. Let me find my episode sheet here. Okay, so the suicide she wouldn't let him stop. The Michelle Carter and Conrad Roy case. Yeah, that sounds really kind of crazy, right? Like, what the hell are you talking about? The suicide she wouldn't let him stop.
Well, she decided already.
Yeah, I know, but she's not the one doing it, right? So, I mean, but she is. Okay, so I'm going to start from the beginning of this, but to give you context first, it's about a teenage girl, right, who convinces her boyfriend to kill himself.
Oh.
Yeah.
No.
That's why I said
a teenager.
The suicide,
how old?
She wouldn't let him stop. She was 17 at the time, and he was 18.
Okay. Very young.
And this is not about just her failing to stop him from suicide. He actually got scared at one point and tried to back out, but she told him to keep going. Yeah, so the more you look at the details here, the worse it gets. And there are moments where it looks like his death had kind of become like a part of this story that she was already telling before it even happened, right? It was just this, it's just weird. And it just makes you question humanity. It's really messed up.
Okay, so tell us about those
Michelle Carter
two
and
people.
Conrad Roy. Conrad Roy is the victim. Okay, so again, I'm going to start from the beginning here. Because the final detail in this case, it only really makes sense once you understand the whole pattern. Okay. So the simple version of this case, if I just gave you a very quick synopsis, you might say something like Michelle Carter sent awful messages to Conrad Roy before he died by suicide, right? But that's a super simple version and doesn't actually explain what really happened in the case. Because it wasn't just one text. It was not just one bad moment. It was more of a relationship that mostly happened through phones. It was a young man who had been struggling for a very long time. And it was a girl who at one point seemed to be trying to help him. So that's where things get a little bit confusing, because it starts out, at first it sounds like she was trying to help him. But then in the end, she's convincing him to kill himself, right? So
wow, that's a very complicated introduction for this story.
I know, right? So you're just thinking how do you go from, you need help, let's get you some help, to,
I help you and then I will.
Why haven't? Yeah, but I will
hurt you.
Gets to the point of why haven't you killed yourself yet?
Huh?
It's really messed up. So, like, I guess, like, you know, how do you move from that one point to another like that? Like, from, like, I'm trying to help someone. I don't care how deranged a relationship is. Never, ever try to tell someone to kill themselves. It's just not cool.
No, it's not.
Anyway, okay, so who they were. Michelle Carter was 17, like I said. Conrad was 18. So they were pretty young, and they first met in Florida in 2012. Okay, so it was a while back. So they were both visiting relatives, and I don't know exactly who the relatives were, but they were visiting family members, both of them. And so, you know, their relationship was mostly through text and through phone calls.
So they had long-distance relationship?
They had a long-distance relationship for the most part.
After they met in Florida.
After they met in Florida. So they went back home, and they actually lived pretty close together. I think they were only about, like, 30 miles apart from each other. But
oh, that's not far.
Right. But, yeah, which is what I thought, too, because at first I thought it was really far as well, because they said, like, the relationship was mostly, you know, through text and over the phone. But apparently they were both in Massachusetts. And so, and about like 35 miles or 30 miles or something like that from each other. But again, you know, they're young kids, right? They're both teenagers. So, but the phone is where everything really happened. I think they only met like 5 times. So, okay. So Michelle was not physically there when this whole thing happened, when he actually ended up committing suicide, right? She was not physically with him, but psychologically, you know, she was the one that pushed him over the edge.
No. Okay. How long were they in relationship?
They were in a relationship for, I think, 2 years. Because I think this happened in 2014. Okay. I'd have to confirm.
Okay. Or 1.5 years.
Don't take my word on.
Yeah,
don't take my word on that. But I think it was something like 2 years. But you know, it was long distance for the most long, quote unquote. Okay. So before getting into the texts that were actually sent and the conversations that they had, I want to just give you enough about the family context, because it kind of matters later. Okay. So Conrad, well, it matters a lot. Conrad was someone with, you know, he wasn't someone that didn't have anyone around him. He did have family, right? He did have his mother, his father. He had sisters, and he had grandparents, great grandmother. And he even worked with his father and his grandfather, and even his uncle in some business, right? Some marine towing and salvage business. So family clearly mattered. There were some issues in the family, some allegations of abuse and stuff like that. But you know, but at the same time, it was clear that family was an important part of his life. Okay. So, that's a little bit about his family. Okay. Now, Conrad was someone who was depressed, right? He struggled with depression, anxiety, and he really did struggle pretty severely with mental health, right? So he struggled quite a bit with that. So it didn't just come out of nowhere, this suicide attempt, right? In fact, he had several attempts at suicide in the past.
Before he met the girlfriend? Yes. But in particular, between October 2012 and July 2014, when this whole thing happened, he had suicide attempts during that period. Okay, so I'm not going to go into detail about them, but, you know, there were certain things that he did involving, you know, overdoses on drugs and drowning and things like that. So he did attempt a few times, but there was a pattern to his attempts, though. Okay. It wasn't just, I want to die, right? And end of story there. It was more about getting close to death, then stopping or letting someone help.
So a lot of times, like, he would
got it.
back out at the last second, right? So he would, attempt it, and then at the last second, when things got really real, he would either reach out for help or he would abandon the attempt, right? So it was clear that, death scared him, and that he wanted to get help, but he didn't. So he kept going back and forth with this. So there was this sort of theme of like ambivalence around the topic, right? He didn't really know what to do, right? He was going back and forth quite a bit because he was obviously in pain, struggling with mental health. Okay, so Michelle initially, like I said, pushed to get help for him. And that kind of complicates things because of this entire case, right? Because the case is based around her pushing him to suicide, right? But initially, she encouraged him to get professional help. And she struggled with mental health as well, right? So she also had an eating disorder, and she struggled with anxiety and depression as well. And she was actually planning to go to McLean Hospital for treatment for that eating disorder. And she even suggested that Conrad go too, so professionals could help him with his depression and so they could support each other. Okay. So she knew help was certainly an option. She even said it herself, right? And, that matters later because it kind of shifts, the tone shifts a little bit later, right? Because that's not at all what she did later when, there was obviously those options. Okay. So the tone changes, right? So Conrad initially resists help. Okay, so she suggests the help. He resists it initially. But over time, the tone of these messages shifts, right? And this is where I think we need to actually hear some of the text, because it's one of the things, it's one of those things to say she pressured him, but then to actually hear what was said gives you a little bit more context for the situation and to see what it sounded like, right? So as Conrad was researching suicide and telling Michelle what he was thinking, she started getting involved in the planning. And the court says that she helped discuss how, where, and when it would happen.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll actually get into these specific texts. At one point, even when discussing carbon monoxide, she tells him, in her opinion, a generator would work because with that, he can't fail, quote unquote. Right. So just think about that part for 1 second, right? It's not, I'm scared for you. It's, hey, if you do it this way, you're guaranteed results.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm confused about how did the shift happen?
Well, that's part of the question that we have to think about, right? Like, what is their dynamic? What's the motive?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of, speculation and thoughts about this, but one idea is that their whole dynamic was really based on kind of like this trauma bonding, right?
Yeah.
It was like a shared emotional experience, someone that they could vent to about their problems, talk about suicide, talk about depression. But at some point, at least some people think that maybe this shifted to like a narrative of of death, right? And of darkness, right? Because you're talking so much about suicide, and you're talking about death, and you're talking about wanting to do it. And eventually, maybe that became like an important part of their dynamic, right? It became a part of like what they always talked about and what they relied on. And, it's things like this, though, that shift slowly over time. So like, I think I've told you about, like, if in psychology, they sometimes talk about the foot in the door phenomenon, where you do a small little ask of someone, like put this sticker on your window because and then over time, you'll put a bigger sign later, ask them for that. And then they're like, well, I already put this sticker on, so I'll put this, poster on. And then, well, I already put this poster on. Maybe I'll even put this big sign that you asked them to put on their front lawn for like political reasons or something. But if you were to just straight up ask them to put this big sign on their lawn, they wouldn't do it, right? So there's things like that where things gradually shift over time. It's easier to shift upward by a little bit once you've already gone a certain amount. And so I'm thinking like that, that could be something to do with it as well, right? Maybe they'd been discussing these things so much that it was just easier to push it there. But I don't know. This is, to me, I just think this case is really fascinating because it's so dark.
Now, what about like the family? Did his family know about his
they knew he was
suicide
depressed.
attempts?
Yes, so they did know about the suicide attempts. His friends knew about them. His family knew about them, and this is actually a really important point because his family was worried about him. Okay, and he was even worried about how his family would react if he actually went through with it. And this is part of the really dark part, is that Michelle convinced him not to worry about his family. Because he was
his
worried.
family's reaction if he did that.
If he did it. Ooh. He was like, oh, I'm worried it would hurt them and, that sort of thing. And he didn't want to hurt his family. He didn't want them to be devastated, which of course they would be, and they are now. But she said things like, oh, don't worry, I'll handle it for you, and all this stuff. Like basically trying to tell him, oh, don't worry too much about that. It's not a big deal. Like, so that's also messed up in itself. Basically saying, oh, just kill yourself because, I can handle your family. They'll get over it. Like,
I'm so confused about this relationship and the bonding,
right?
Because
I know.
What is the love in that?
Well, that's exactly it, right? Was it ever really love, or was it, like I said, this like dark sort of trauma bonding, or like this emotional tie need to just discuss these things with someone, right? Or feel the need like you're someone, like you're that person for someone in their life, like you, like they need you, or like you get that attention and you feel like that's something that would be great for you to have, like it's just I don't know, but it's really messed up. So she even says things like when he starts to talk about like, wanting to do it, and then sometimes he'll back out and, not do it. She tells him things like, you keep pushing it off. Like that's one of her actual texts. You keep pushing it off. She says, you just have to do it. And
how did he react to that message?
He says things like it might hurt his family, or it might do this, or like but other times he's like, yeah, you're right, I got it, I got to do this. But she tells him if he doesn't do it now, he's never going to do it. So like she's encouraging him to do it.
If you're healthy, well, we cannot really say this because he was struggling with the mental health, right? Obviously, like he would think like, oh, okay, I told her that I want to do something really bad by killing myself. I would expect that she would say, oh, no, don't do that. But if she's encouraging him to do something as negative, then he should think why she did that.
Well, yeah, but that's the thing, right? Like,
well, like
logically, you look back and you're like, well, how did he not see that this is such weird behavior for your partner to be encouraging this? But again, he's struggling with mental health, right? And you have to be, you have to be sympathetic to the idea that like people that struggle with mental health this severe can't think properly for themselves, right? There are lots of, and I don't know what the issues were neurologically or anything like that, but there are lots of real neurological issues that people suffer from and have these chemical imbalances in their brain that do not allow them to think the way that we do in a logical way. Right? They're missing parts in their brain that allow them to suppress those negative thoughts and behaviors and stop that rumination. So anyway, she's telling him all these things. She even says stuff like, "You better not be bullshitting," and saying he's going to do it.
It's okay. The more I hear about how their texts were, to me, we can also think in a way that she's kind of saying, "Hey, I would challenge you. Would you really do that?" And then from his side, he might say, "Yeah, I said this and I can prove it to you that I would do it." It's more like one challenge that, like, "Oh no, you're just saying something that you will not make it."
Right. But that's the thing, right?
And then the other person, the guy, "No, I'm not saying anything. I will do what I say."
Yeah, exactly.
So that kind of dynamic.
Well, that is one of the things that was brought up, is that she says something about him promising her. She's
what?
like, "You promised me," and that's the question that I thought of when I saw that. I was like, "What? Why? Why would she want him to promise her about
to do it?
To do it? Yeah, she like saying, "You better not be bullshitting me," and you're probably just gonna do it or like start doing it and then purposely get caught, like meaning that he's gonna get rescued, right? Which is a good thing, but she's not presenting it like it's a good thing, right? So like it could be him, he could want to survive and he just doesn't know how to deal with all the pain. That's what it sounds like to me. Yeah. It's like he backs out and he's saying like, "I'm afraid," and like, "I don't know," and going back and forth. But instead of saying and pushing, talking him off the ledge, she's essentially pushing him. Right?
Yeah, well, she essentially was hoping that, okay, just prove it, don't say it.
Yeah.
But that's not in the right situation to do that.
She even said, that's...
Yeah.
That's not the
time,
the
but
place
if you look at like the...
I know.
Just a normal relationship, and then if you
Well, you keep saying you're going to do it, but you don't do it.
Yeah.
Right? Like...
Not talking about doing something bad, but like, if you promise something, if it's in a normal relationship, a guy usually says, "Oh yeah, I'm going to do something. I promise you. I will give it to you,"
Yep.
But if the guy does not do it, then the girl will be pissed off.
She gets annoyed, right?
Exactly. But in this situation, it is not.
That's
in
not
that
exactly.
sense.
But that's the question though that people talk about too, right? Is like, what is like her rationale for sending these types of texts, and like, is she like, there's different discussions about what her motive was. Was it that she was starting to get annoyed by hearing this, right? That's one interpretation. She was like, "Oh, you keep talking about this. I'm tired of hearing of it," right?
Yeah.
There's the other interpretation of like, she doesn't, she wants him to get it over with because she thinks he's in so much pain, right? That's a possibility. It doesn't seem likely from all the evidence, but that's a possibility. And there's other possibilities too. She had told her friends, for example, that he was suffering mentally and that he had these suicidal ideations and things like that. So that was another theme. She'd already told all these people and basically set it up so that they were expecting something to happen. And then if he didn't do it, maybe they would think, "Oh, you're a liar. You said he had a problem, but he doesn't," right? And that would make her look bad. So like other people think that might have been part of the motive, right? So there's so many different reasons there, but it's pretty messed up. Okay, so let's get back actually to the family fear part, because you did talk a little bit about like, what was the family thinking? Yeah. Were they aware, right? And that's, again, part of the things that kind of is one of the darkest parts is that like he was genuinely concerned about his family. And usually you're concerned about how they're going to react. That says a lot about his character. He sounds like he was a
a decent person, right? He had empathy.
Yeah.
He wanted to make sure that his parents and his sisters were going to be okay. And you'd think that would be enough of a reason to stop someone from doing it, right? Being like, yeah, you're right. They are going to suffer. This is going to be horrible for them. But Michelle doesn't do that. She does the opposite. She keeps going. And the court actually quotes an exchange where he says he has a bad feeling that this will create a lot of depression between his parents and sisters. And that's a pretty human reaction, right? But Michelle talks him out of it. She tells him that his parents know he's in a bad place. She says everyone has tried to help. She says there comes a point where there's nothing anyone can do to save him. She says everyone will be sad for a while, but they will get over it and move on.
My God, I don't get it.
That's what I'm saying. Like, this case is one of the darkest cases I've ever heard of. Like, I can't even fathom talking someone into suicide. It's just so wow. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know how you can justify that to yourself unless you're like a psychopath or something. Because how do you do that? So, that's what really bothers me, is that there's just seems to be no empathy. And I just don't even understand the motive, but I can guess, reasons, and we'll talk more in detail about those. But, okay. So she, and she's not missing his fear. She knows he's afraid. She understands the fear well enough to answer it and to talk to him about it. But she's basically just saying, don't worry, they'll survive your death. And
was she angry when she was texting that?
Well, no, but she frames it almost in like, I'll be disappointed, right? The texts come across that way, at least the way I read them, right? And I don't know about you, but like, I know when I got in trouble with like my parents, I always felt so much worse and was way more likely to want to change my behavior when they said, I'm not angry. I'm just really disappointed.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, fuck. And you just think like, that's so much worse. Right. And so that's what it sounded like. She was doing that kind of emotional manipulation with him. Right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Anyway. So the promise me thing is really odd, right? When she says, promise me that. And that's one of those details.
Promise me that you would kill yourself.
That you will kill yourself, right? Like, it's just like, what? Why would you get someone to promise you? It's like, promise me you'll love me forever. Like, you and I talk about, like, literally that. Like, every day, like, promise me you'll always love me the same way this, right? Like, every day, like, do you still love me? Like, a million times over and over and over. It's like, yeah. But, like, that, promise me, like, basically the opposite. That you will get rid of yourself. God. And like, I don't know. So days before his death, Conrad says he's going to do it on a particular day, right? And Michelle then says, do you promise? And he says, I promise, babe. And then he says, I have to now. And Michelle tells him he cannot break a promise, then suggests that he goes into a quiet parking lot to do it.
And he did it?
And that's where he ended up doing it.
Oh my God. Okay.
And this is like, that's the weirdest thing, is like, how does suicide become a promise? Like that, it's really,
I don't understand.
Like, especially, we think about this, like, what's happening? This is someone struggling so much right now. They are, and looking for help in any way possible. And remember, he keeps backing out of these situations. He keeps reaching out for help. He tells his parents after some of his suicide attempts, right? He tells his family and his friends, and he's trying, but he can't seem to get there, right? He keeps going back to this really dark place. That's when people need you to, people need to be there for those times, right? But instead, she's doing the opposite.
So, so she says, right, do you promise me? And he says, yeah. And it becomes basically something he owes her. And so, it's no longer, what are you going to do? It's now, you told me you were going to do this. So that opens up a ton of possibilities. Like, is she tired of him backing out? Like we talked about before, right? Maybe she thinks he needs peace. Maybe she wants the uncertainty to end. Maybe he already started telling people a story and she needs him to follow through. Maybe she thinks she is helping him in some way. Maybe the promise gives her leverage, or it's some horrible mix of all of that, right? But it just feels like a very controlling thing to do in any situation, and especially in a relationship. So, anyway. Now, the next part of the story is what I think what prosecutors focused on quite a bit, was this idea of kind of a story rehearsal, right? They referred to it as like a dry run, but it's essentially a story rehearsal that for me at least, it makes sense more psychologically. So let me set the scene for you. So before Conrad died, Michelle was texting friends as if he was already missing. Okay. She told them she had not heard from him. She said his family was looking for him. But according to the court,
that
was not true at all. She was actually communicating with him daily. Like, she was communicating with him up until it happened. And I haven't even told you the most disturbing part yet. Okay, and she knew he was not missing because she was talking to him. So it's weird that she'd be telling all of these people. Right? She also asked a friend whether a portable generator could kill someone, even though she and Conrad had already talked about carbon monoxide as like a poisoning method.
Yeah.
So that's a huge detail, because now the case is not only about what she says to Conrad, it's also about what she's telling other people before he's even dead. Right? So that's where I start wondering, like, if Conrad's death had become somehow useful to her as a story, right? Maybe she was rehearsing the role of the worried girlfriend, right? She's setting it up for after he does it, right? And that's, I think, part of what the prosecution was arguing during the case. Maybe she was getting attention as the worried girlfriend. Maybe she wanted people to see her as the person closest to this crisis, right? Because, and then, the really dark possibility is also this, right? If Conrad survives, what happens to the story she already started telling, right? If he backs out again, like he has before.
Well, she was hoping that he really killed himself in the first place.
So that she can play the victim, and she can play the poor girlfriend that has to deal with all of this, and poor her.
Lies.
And it just becomes this and these are not, I can't speak to what actually happened, but like these things start running through my head as like, these are possibilities of maybe what she was thinking. So, it's very complicated and dark when you think about those possibilities.
So how did the police get to her, though?
How did the police get to her?
Yeah.
They found her texts, right? So they ended up finding the texts that he and her were sending back and forth to each other.
Was that like the...
because they interviewed people, right? So they interviewed people, and they got texts to try to understand why, he would do this, right? And that is a good question, though. I didn't come across exactly like how they came across, like why would they need to look at her text for that? But I guess in a case like that, maybe that's like procedure that they always look through their text. I don't know.
They screen through all, whatever that.
That's a really good question, though. I
could be the evidence for the case, right? And then the police could have the tool to screen whatever that was going through in the text, and
exactly,
pictures,
something, right? Like I would imagine they would have access to that. Like
so maybe they narrow it down, to something suspicious. So there is text here that talks about,
because there's so many cases where people actually
suicide.
But there's so many cases where people murder someone and then try to make it look like suicide, right? So I guess they have to probably rule those possibilities out. Especially if like he had a history of attempts but always backed out, and maybe that wasn't really fitting his pattern, right?
Well, it could be, right? I mean, if you talk about the guy who tried to kill himself several times, and then finally he killed himself. Yeah. So and there could be like two big possibilities. The first possibility is, okay, he finally decided to do that on his own, But and the second one, maybe somebody actually pushes him to do that. But
exactly, you hope that's not the case, right?
Yeah,
that seems like a really dark possibility, but in this case, it is.
Yeah,
it is the case. So let's get on to the actual night of the event, right? The final night. And this is where all those pieces that we discussed really matter, right? So the phone relationship with her and him matter, with Conrad and Michelle, right? They were on the phone all the time. The prior patterns that they had together, the fact that she once encountered, the possibility that he should have help, right? That he maybe get help, but then shift into the opposite, right? So that shift from helping to hurting sort of really speaks volumes to some of the details afterwards.
Did he speak to... Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all good. What did you drop?
My phone.
Oh.
Sorry.
It's all good. I almost dropped these headphones like 1,000 times.
Yeah. Oh, I was about to ask you, did he actually see the psychiatrist at all?
I believe he did. I believe he was talking to like professionals.
Because they should have his record.
Yeah, they should. I would be surprised if he wasn't. I kind of just assumed that he was talking to, a psychiatrist or like at least a clinical psychologist, but I don't know for sure. Okay, so all of these details, the pressure texts, the family reassurance, the promises, the story rehearsals, they all matter, because at this point it's not just he was suicidal and she knew, right? That would be one thing if she didn't prevent him from doing it, but it's not even just that. It's she was fully aware of everything and she was pushing him.
She did not talk to like his parents or family about that.
No, and that's the part that is really disturbing, right? She didn't tell his family. She pretended that he was missing up until the day that he actually followed through, right? So like she knew he hesitated before. She knew he was scared. She knew his family knew about this past behavior. She knew that he was worried about his family if he went through with it. So he was hesitating. But like she still made him promise. She still pressured him about delaying, like got annoyed with him that he wasn't doing it, right?
Wow.
Right. So like she treated getting caught like, if you get caught, you're probably going to do this and get caught purposely as if he betrayed her, but as if that would be a betrayal on his part. You know what I mean? It's just, so it's really dark. And she already told other people some version of the story where he was missing and she was worried about him and all that. So she was already creating this whole narrative up to that night. And then the final night on July 12th, 2014, Conrad drove to a store parking lot in Massachusetts, and he ended up dying by carbon monoxide poisoning in his truck. Now, I'm not going to describe how to do that. Of course, there's very ethical reasons for not going into those details, but the method matters legally. But the episode really is about psychology and pressure and what happened before and when he got scared. Now, during the period when police believe he was in the truck, there were 2 long phone calls between him and Michelle. And unfortunately, they were not recorded, right? They didn't actually have the recordings of these calls. One call was from Conrad to Michelle, and another was from Michelle to Conrad. And both of them were long. But the calls, again, like I said, they were not recorded, so we can't say for certain what was said. But what we do have is what she said later about it to a friend. So shortly after the second call, Michelle texted a friend saying Conrad had called her, that she heard a loud motor, that it sounded like he was in pain, and that he would not answer when she said his name. Okay. So, these details are very important because it suggests a narrative of, these stories that she's creating, this identity that she's trying to present herself as. Then she texted that she thought he had killed himself. So she's not confused in some abstract way. She knows this is happening. She knows he's in danger. And she does not call 911. She does not call his family. She does not tell him to get out. So, she's not there physically, right? So that's what makes this case interesting and kind of complicated. And it was a bit of an issue for the prosecution because technically she wasn't there. She didn't push him. She didn't stab him. She didn't shoot him. But she did convince him, right? And that was their job to say, look, he had reservations and she convinced him otherwise. So that's, that's what makes this really tricky. Now, this is the part that I think is like the most damning of this entire case and the craziest, darkest thing that she did. Okay. So, weeks after everything happened, Michelle texted a friend and said Conrad's death was her fault, right? She said she could have stopped him. She said she was on the phone with him, and she said he got out because he was scared. Now, everything there makes it sound like, okay, she really cared, she was whatever. But then, apparently, after he got out, she told him, get back in. So he got out of the car, right? And that's similar to the pattern that he had before. He got scared and he backed out, or he reached out for help. He was on the phone with his girlfriend, Michelle. Yeah. He got out of the truck because it started to feel real to him. He knew he was going to die. So he got out for fresh air to catch his breath so he wouldn't die of carbon monoxide poisoning. He got out of the truck and she told him to get back in. How messed up is that? So that's the part that just is like, wow, he was clearly seeking help. He wanted to get out. He did not want to follow through with it. He was scared. Yeah. And instead of helping him through that, right, she instead told him to do the opposite. And this is where it's like, well, why would she do that? What the hell is her motive here, right? And
well, she's not healthy either.
She's not healthy either, right? And that is a good point. That is a very good point, right? She is obviously not healthy either. She had a lot of demons, and that was part of what made them bond in the first place. But I mean, most of the time when people are depressed or anxious or whatever, it's usually, something that they inflict on themselves, not on other people. Right. So, I mean, it's possible that, she was doing this out of guilt, or could be a distorted idea of mercy or some emotional exhaustion, right? She was just tired of dealing with him talking about these things, or tired, or it could be that she was trying to control things, right? She wanted to be able to control someone's life. What, bigger form of control is there than trying to control someone's life or death, right? That's, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, it could even be her trying to explain the worst thing she did in a way that sounds less monstrous, right? She maybe was just trying to do that, justify it. But no matter which way you take it, the basic fact is still super disturbing. He got out and she told him to get back in.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's not just failing to save him. That's pushing against the part of him that was trying to survive.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, what do you think? Do you think she wanted him dead, or do you think she just wanted the cycle to end? Or do you think it was something else? Maybe it was mercy.
I think it's very complex situations. As I mentioned, she's not in a healthy mind either. Mm-hmm. So she might see that as kind of, if I really don't know, but I don't think there is no kind of love in there. It's more about the psychological bonding, or she might think, okay, if I want to do that, but I'm afraid, so maybe I would kind of know what the experience it would be to know that someone that I think I like would die, to give her some kind of satisfactions for herself, or what kind of curiosity that she has with her own condition. It could that be? I don't know. That's how I think about it, because like
I never even thought of that perspective.
Like this couple, they're not in a healthy mindset, right?
Right.
So she might want to experience that, but she's not ready enough. So what about if she's projecting that?
Wow, that's a really interesting perspective. I thought of so many different perspectives, and that one didn't cross my mind. But yeah, it is possible that she was maybe considering things like that herself, and she wanted to just know what the feeling and the experience was like, and whether or not she'd be able to go through with it herself.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't make the situation any better.
No.
It's still a very manipulative and self-serving thing to do.
I agree.
But it is an interesting possibility that I hadn't considered.
Because we cannot look at it from just a healthy person's perspective. Like, this girl also has a problem,
Yeah.
So we should kind of see the possibilities, what she was going through with that kind of emotions. It's not only I want him to suffer, but what is I don't know,
right?
what kind of narrative
that's crazy. I never even thought of that. That's really interesting. But yeah, I'm curious to know what like the majority of people think, because there's so many, like there's so much rich like psychological detail to this case, right, where we really have no idea what's going through their heads in these moments, but there's so many possibilities. So eventually, what happened to Michelle, right? What happened to Michelle Carter? Well, she was eventually charged with involuntary manslaughter as a youthful offender. Okay, because remember, she was only 17.
Yeah, that's also another thing that I'm thinking. Okay, like in that situations, both of them were probably not mature enough to deal with this mental health situations. They did not know how to seek help, and Connor.
So, but I always wonder about that too. It's like, at what point, are you able truly to make those types of decisions? What age? And at what point do you know right from wrong? And the thing is, I think people know right from wrong a lot earlier. Though, right? I think normally, but I still don't think. I still think that there has to be some sort of moral compass that supersedes everything, no matter the age, even if you are in a mental
you're a
state.
child.
Even though you're a child, you know what I mean?
Something, not hurting other kids. I
don't think you can use she was only 17. When I was 17.
No.
And I've been depressed. I've experienced those things. I'm not saying I'm in any way in the same mental state that either of them were, or that anything is comparable. But I'm just saying, I don't think there's any scenario where I could feel so down that I would convince. No, I know there's no way I would do that. That's just, it's so gross. I don't know.
It's just very complicated, I think. Very complicated situations. When I was in that age, what did I do? I was just playing around.
I know, right? Yeah. Yeah. So they did convict her. And the court held that the evidence was sufficient, that her verbal conduct was not protected by the First Amendment, because the defense tried to argue that it was, part of her First Amendment right to be able to, speak freely. But it's not. But the point here is not, is not trying to say words are murder. It's more specific than that, right? It's actually looking at a specific relationship, a vulnerability, pressure, and knowledge that she had, and a specific moment when he got out and she told him to get back in. That is very different from just, it's free speech.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, so that's why this case matters legally. But, for me, the psychological point is still the strongest part. She knew his fears. She knew his doubts. She knew his pattern of backing out, and that she was afraid of, that he was afraid of hurting his family, that he was afraid of everything. And she just manipulated that in my eyes. Okay. And then, so the possible motives, we've talked a little bit about this one, but I don't think there's, that one explanation for any of the possibilities that we discussed is really enough, because it could be several things, right, working together. And, maybe it was guilt. Maybe the later message to her friend is exactly what it sounds like. Maybe she knew she had done something terrible and she finally said it. Although, I don't know. I think it's more likely that she just wanted more attention. But please don't hate me, everyone, for saying that. But then, but the question of that too is if you're just saying that to be the center of attention, I mean, it's not really real guilt, right? You're not really feeling guilty about it if you're saying it to someone just to get attention. But maybe it was, some sort of distorted mercy. Maybe she really thought he would be better off if he wasn't suffering anymore. I don't know. Maybe that was some way of thinking. It was a more charitable way for everything to proceed. But I mean, I think that's a hard one to argue. So, yeah. So, this is a really, really deep one. That's the case.
But did she make any confession at all? Saying...
As far as I know, she didn't really say much, Okay. I couldn't find too many details on exactly that, right? I think that usually in cases like this, they try to keep them off the stand and off of, speaking too much about the case. Because, I mean, I don't think anyone's going to side with her, hearing her side, quote unquote, her side of the story, right? So, I don't know. That's,
well, choosing the healthy and right circle is very important.
Yeah, no shit. I know. I told you that too. It's when I first came to Iowa, I was like, oh yeah, because I've always been a very positive,
with your family.
Yeah, I've always been a very positive person and a very and I always thought, I could do anything on my own, blah, blah, blah. But then came to Iowa on my own, no friends, no family here. And it was super lonely. And you don't realize how much you need that support system and that positivity surrounding you.
Right.
And that's what I had back home. And you realize how privileged you are sometimes in those environments.
Yeah.
I didn't realize how amazing. I knew I had it great. I didn't realize how amazing it was to have that positivity surrounding you all the time, because quickly you can get really down really quickly. Yeah. So,
Yeah. Anyway, that is the case of Michelle Carter and Conrad Roy.
Ooh, okay.
So yeah, she didn't get very much time though. No. So I think she was.
Did she get any treatment?
No, I don't think so. So she ended up serving. I think she was sentenced eventually to something like 14 months or something like that. And she only ended up serving 11 months in prison. And like, that just doesn't seem like enough time. I don't know if she learned her lesson after that. She was, she was 17. Comes out, she's still a teen when she leaves, I don't know, usually these things take a long time, right?
26. Oh no, it's only 11 months, right? You said
11 months. Not years, months. And I don't know, if I were the family, I would be pretty pissed at that sentencing.
Yeah, well, probably because she did not get involved directly. Well, we don't know if we can. I don't know if I can say that directly or indirectly, but she is pushing that. But she took a plea deal, right? She took a plea deal, and that usually in the setting she was not sentence. There. Yeah, but I guess eventually she was convicted of involuntary manslaughter. Yeah, right. Which is I didn't mean, you think of that wording, involuntary. Yeah. I don't think that really fits this case very well because it was clearly voluntary manslaughter to me. I don't know how you can interpret that any other way. Don't understand law.
Clearly tried to get him to do it. He was leaving and she pushed him back in. Yeah. I mean, anyway, okay, that was a long one, but I had to, I was excited to tell you this one because I was like, holy crap, this one's crazy. And that's why I had so many notes because I had a bunch of texts and all this stuff that I was like, wow, can't believe some of the stuff. But anyway, I hope everyone liked that. Yeah. Well, not liked the details, but, enjoyed the craziness of the case. So, Tell Me the Crime, episode 14. See you next week. Bye.